welcome to Subject Matters, where the subjects matter. I know, cheesy, but I thought it sounded pretty good. Maybe I won't deliver it so cheesy. Anyway, this is the third episode, I believe, of Subject Matters, and today I really didn't know what I wanted my first topic to be. I thought about it a lot, but what it is I have a list of topics I want to talk about. I wanted to do one of those, but every time I would start thinking about it, I didn't feel motivated to do it because I was like, I could go through this checklist, but basically I wanted to do something more along the line of current events to keep the focus of the audience as well as my attention. And I figure if I kind of just keep with current events, then I'll eventually get to those topics through a roundabout way. Or if there's a slow week, which there never is in this world, then I would go ahead and attack one of those topics. So I'm just going to stick with a current event and kind of spin it into a topic that I think is worth investigating. And again, I'm just going to spin my opinion on this. And since I don't have any feedback from comments or I don't have an audience really, what I'm going to do, I'm thinking of playing devil's advocate to where I might present an opinion. And then next episode, I'll begin with the devil's advocate opinion of how, basically the opposite view that I take today. And then I'll introduce a new topic. So every episode will kind of be the end of the episode of last week and the beginning of a new one. And so you'll come every week to see what the opposite opinion is of what I presented, as well as what new opinion I'm going to present this week. That's the plan. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. But something's been on my mind lately. The subject we're going to talk about today is, I guess as the title suggests if you click the video, it has to do with racism, or prejudice specifically. And what got me thinking about it was this game called Mafia 3. It's a game basically, it was released I think like 2 weeks ago. And it's basically a mafia game where you play as a mobster. But specifically in this game, you play as a returning Vietnam veteran who's I think half black, half white, and he returns to a fictionalized version of New Orleans. I think it's called New Bordeaux, and it takes place in the 60s. And as we all know, in real America, it's pretty racist, and that the game reflects that. And it's just an artistic portrayal of that, but it's very real from what I hear in the reviews. There's like times where you'll confront Klansmen as you're walking around in like the city. Sometimes regular citizens will react to you negatively. They'll walk away from you, or they'll like mumble under their breath. The cops will do the same. If you commit a crime in like a white neighborhood or a rich neighborhood, I'm going to apologize. I might be clearing my throat a lot and sniffling. It's because I'm getting over a sickness. And that's also why I didn't post last week's video, which I should acknowledge. I didn't post last week's video because I was sick. Anyway, but if you commit crimes in like a poor neighborhood or a ghetto neighborhood where there's minorities and other black people, the police will be slow to respond or won't even respond at all. And it's very... I think, it's very true to life, kind of. Again, it's an artistic portrayal of it. And a lot of people, when they were reviewing the game, kept saying that it was a neat gimmick and that it was neat, very interesting, very cool, very raw, it was very uncomfortable. But they kept saying it was a neat gimmick, a neat game mechanic. And they appreciated it for what it was as well. But the problem I kept having was that they kept calling it a gimmick or a mechanic. And I guess I'll preface this as saying I don't have any black friends. Or, I guess I don't mind saying it like that. Sorry if it offends you. But I have talked to many people who are black in my life. And I just kept thinking, this isn't a mechanic. It's not a gimmick. It's not neat. Again, in the context of the game, it's probably something they've never felt before. But it's not neat, and it's not a mechanic, and it's not something that's left in the past. And the biggest thing you'll notice when you look at these popular news, video game outlets that report on reviews and news, is that they're predominantly run by white males in their like late 30s. And that's not to say that their opinions aren't valid or they can't speak about culture. It just goes to show why they kept calling it a neat gimmick, I think is what bothered me. Basically, what I mean by that is, so I've only talked, what it is, I'm very forward with my opinions and questions with people. And the first time it was brought to my attention, it was like through a joke. I asked my coworker, said, hey, if you could time travel anywhere, where would you go? And he said, there's not many places I could go. And I was like, well, like, let's just say nobody would be racist to you or nothing, and you could travel wherever. And he says, he was laughing, and he's like, that's not realistic. Like, people are racist now. I can't just travel anywhere, you know, like, I guess, he's like, maybe I'll just go to the dinosaurs, since I guess I won't run into problems there, besides getting eaten. And that was a really weird culture shock, because I'm also a minority, but I'm not black, and I'm going to go into, like, the distinctions between minority as a broad term and then just colored people or black. Like, I'm not going to go into too many distinctions, but I'm going to show how there's a difference, you know. I've never felt that kind of prejudice. And then another coworker had at a different job. He also, we were talking, but he got, like, real with me. And him, for context, he was a really big guy, really tall, and, you know, he looked scary. But he wasn't really. He was a pretty goofy guy. But he got real with me and got real sad. And again, that was surprising. But yeah, he was just telling me that, like, basically the shit ain't funny of how people don't know what it's like to be a black man. And again, I mean, it's semi-sexist, you know? I think a black person in general has it. He was basically explaining how it's tough. He's like, you don't know what it feels like looking the way I look and walking into a room and everybody looking at you like you're going to do something bad. Cops will look at you, glance at you, even if they're not going to stare you down the shitty way they make you feel just with a stare. You know, it's real. And, you know, it's just hard to explain. He was telling me that it's hard to explain for him how it feels. But again, if you saw how he was saying it, it was pretty sad. It was pretty like, fuck, dude. Like, I honestly don't know what you're talking about. Or maybe I just act stupid to it. And again, there's a lot of layers to that topic already. But yeah, so the game basically got me thinking about real world prejudice and racism. And just how how people who don't know about that speak about it a certain way. And it just kind of, basically in media in general, it's really tough because I want to go on tangents. Let me go ahead and again preface this whole thing is that basically I'm going to be talking and I'm going to get to points where I stop and think of it kind of like me walking through a maze and hitting a wall. It's not because I can't, I'm stuck. It's because I'm going to stop myself, otherwise I'll keep going on tangents and we'll be all lost. But I'm basically, again, I'm not trying to prove a point. I'm not trying to say that popular media and culture is whitewashed or anything. I just want us to ask questions as to why it's the way it is and see what we can come up with just through discussion. And if not, I'll play devil's advocate in the next episode. And basically, it kind of goes back to a philosophy or a thought of a mindset I have where I believe that prejudice / racism is as American as apple pie. Not that that's a good thing. It's pretty shitty, actually, but it's true. And I did a quick rundown of how just Anglo-Europeans, when they first settled, it just was an issue from the moment we got here, from Americans getting here. But the funny thing is, so I'll just start. Jamestown was settled in 1619. Brief history lesson. Yes, I looked this up and I have it in front of me, so I don't remember these things. But they actually brought black slaves with them at that moment. So from the moment we were settling, we were already putting slaves to work. And in 1838, fast forward a bit, is when the Trail of Tears happened, which, as we all know, is basically when we herded the Indians to another land and took all of the other land. We took all of the land that they originally lived on and said, this is ours now, screw your ass. We're going to move you over here to this other small piece of land. And this brief history isn't so much about like prejudice and racism. It's just, and that's kind of what my point is. Let me just continue. And then after that, in 1846 was the Mexican-American War. And that was started because we wanted California and Texas because they were very profitable places for agriculture and the gold rush. And we basically fought the war, won, and then just drew a line of, we own all this now. But we never took the original parts that belonged to Mexico. We never took the people out of them. We said, you can stay here and become part of America. And so we have a bunch of Mexicans now who don't know where they belong, don't know where to go. There's a neat history about that. Y'all should probably look up. And so this is 1619 when we settled. 1838, the Indians. 1846, Mexicans. And then in 1849 was when a lot of Chinese came to America for the gold rush and to build a better life. But we ended up, again, they were just marginalized because there were so few of them, and we ended up using them for railroad. And all they could get were menial jobs because everybody had menial jobs at that time. And after 1849, we'll jump to 1861, which is the Civil War, which no matter how you slice it, that shit was about slavery. And basically racism and just keeping blacks as slaves instead of making them free people. After 1861, fast forward to the late 1800s to early 1920s, and we have North African North African immigrants as well as people from what we call the Middle East. And again, those were fleeing or coming from that country because of religious persecution. So very early on, it's obvious that America is a beacon for escaping prejudice in the form of religious persecution. And it's not these people only. A lot of people, I mean, Chinese came for a better life. Mexicans, it's just a war called Mexican-American War. Mexicans, they got stuck here when the U.S. or the colonies beat them in a war. And the Trail of Tears, I mean, the Indians just didn't know any better, trusted the wrong people, and got screwed over. The interesting thing is the original Anglo-Europeans actually came here for the exact same reason, because they were being prejudiced against for their religious beliefs. And they said, get on the boat and get out of here. And they found the New World. Or they didn't find it. Again, there's a whole, not even Columbus found it. There's a whole history of that. Again, history is interesting. But the reason I bring all of this up is because right now, in the climate that we're in and the environment, is just that whether it's Black Lives Matter or whether it's as early as the 70s and 50s, black people have just had a raw deal. And it's not, I bring up all these other cultures because we're all in the same boat, but specifically I'm talking about Mafia and how it portrays the 60s and how we can say that racism's not around, but no matter how you slice it, it is around because that's kind of what the history lesson was to show you that all throughout history, we've come here to escape prejudice only to be taught and reinforced that, yeah, but you're still not as important as the majority America. Again, it kind of goes in line with the public opinion I talked about. They're not the majority, so they don't matter as much, and so we can treat them how we want. Mexicans, Native Americans, blacks, North African and Middle Eastern cultures and races, and the Chinese, of course, unless I mentioned that already. So all of these general cultures that we blanket under the word minority. Minorities just get the short end of the stick. But I want to focus on blacks because it just, again, 1619, they were already slaves. We didn't even treat them as human. I read a history book at one point that basically said as much. A scientific book saying that they are not human. And also mentioned how gays were retards and stuff like that. Really interesting how we used to look at people, human beings back in the day. And then you have the Civil War. And then you have desegregation. But it's all a facade because underneath the American dream, the American dream was built on the backs of minorities and slaves and just prejudice in general. And so that's what I mean by it's as American as apple pie. People want to say that we came here for freedom and strength and stuff. We also forget that we came here not necessarily for prejudice, but we have gotten this far because of racism and prejudice, which is really fucking sad, and which is even more reason as to why we should really try harder to make it a non-issue. And so again, let me go back to the desegregation. Basically, we desegregated, but you have Klansmen, you have people who are just like not about that life for some fucking reason. Sorry for the language. It just really upsets me, and it's baffling why people are like this. I'm trying to stay emotionally objective, but give you my subjective opinion. And yeah, so I know I keep repeating desegregation. Basically, this is the point in America where things start to change in the late 60s, because now I guess it was the invention of the color TV or TV in general. We get into pop culture, and that kind of is, now we live in an era where pop culture is culture. They're like synonymous with each other, if not the same thing. But back then, there really wasn't a culture. There was like Leave It to Beaver with the imaginary America, and then there was the real America where you have all these minorities basically building America, and everyone else is sitting on top of them. Middle America and upper class America sitting on top. And you can blame it on Hollywood or whatever. But anyway, you have this pop culture renaissance, you could say, with music and movies and clothing. And that's it's interesting because a lot of this was kind of influenced by black culture and minority culture to a large extent. But I mean, when you think 70s and 60s, you think afros, and fucking white people ain't walking around with afros. You know what I'm saying? You think of like those flannel shirts and the bell bottoms. And for the most part, you think of like Soul Train. You think of Earth, Wind, and Fire. Think of the Bee Gees, which were a white group. But you think of a culture and a sound that was largely black. And that kind of carried forward into pop culture. They're very marketable. You get into athletics, and you get into, when we started letting minorities and blacks enter sports, things just kind of change, and now they dominate a certain presence in the media, whether it's athletes or reality stars or rappers or actors. A lot of now very famous people are black. And what's interesting is that if we look at the way media presents them, I just wrote down some examples. This recent movie, Dope, Straight Out of Compton, TV shows such as Everybody Hates Chris or The Get Down on Netflix. Then you got things like Freedom Riders. You got other things like Stand and Deliver to the Hispanics. You could think of Love and Basketball. There's a lot of movies, basically. When you look at all these movies, what do you recognize about the minorities portrayed in them? They live in shitty situations. They live in a ghetto. They live in a hood. They're trying to get out of a bad situation and make it to the top, or they're trying to just get out of a bad situation and live another day. However you see it, this is kind of how they're used and portrayed in media. And the way they're portrayed in media is interesting because art reflects life and vice versa. Life reflects art. And so in this kind of mentality where one reflects the other, nobody ever stops to ask, is this real? Do these people, minorities and blacks, live in shitty situations? Do they really get beaten? Do they really get bullied? Do they really get approached by gangs? Or are they all really scared to walk home at night? Nobody ever asked this, because to them it's a movie. It's a song. Rappers are really funny because they just breed fantasy. Talk about drugs, talk about money, talk about women. But the rappers who are successful, they don't do any of that shit. Yeah, they'll buy drugs and stuff. And yeah, they'll have sex with women. But to hustle to get to that point, they couldn't even afford drugs or women or cars. You know what I mean? It's all a fantasy. But nobody tells the people buying it, and nobody tells the people who judge it, that this is a real lifestyle. There's a reason why it sells and it's so marketable, is that it's real. And that's kind of in a roundabout way what I'm getting at with the Mafia 3 comments that reviewers would say. That it's a neat gimmick. It's like, it's not a gimmick. This is real back then, and it's a real problem now. Because, I mean, I think that's kind of just my opinion for the show. The subject is that people are like unaware of how, of the situation, of a racial situation, the racism and prejudice problems that we have in America. If you live in a place where you're not prejudiced, like in San Antonio, it's majority Hispanic. So I don't feel prejudiced against as a Hispanic because I am the majority here. I'm pretty sure some people feel like that in California. But that doesn't mean that a Hispanic or a black person, that doesn't mean a Hispanic just up north a bit isn't going to feel prejudice. Like, basically, I've traveled across to Florida driving, and I've stopped in the South, and I have been, like, basically refused service or given dirty looks or rude comments at diners or gas stations along the way. The racism is alive and well, and it's not surprising. That's kind of, it's really hard. This is a really tough topic to cover. Maybe it shouldn't have been my first one. But basically, yeah, and the fact that people say that it's not alive and that it's not a thing anymore, those people are living in denial because racism has to be a thing in America because America was sown, it has the stitching all across that red, white, and blue flag of prejudice, racism, and standing on the backs of minorities and hard workers. We only like to write about the hard workers in America, the inventors, the successors, the successful people. But I think that's basically what I'm trying to get at, is that I think it's important to also keep in mind that racism is real and it's alive and well today, and the way media portrays it isn't all fake. I mean, media does exaggerate, it makes it big, it makes it flashy, but at the end of the day, I mean, it's real, and it's real shitty, and I think we need to ask ourselves, why is it like that? Why is this true? Oh, I remembered another example. A coworker of mine, she told me how she went to a school, and she actually calls it a black school in some part in the South, and she lived there for like 2 years, and she said that the gymnasium of the school had a giant hole in the top, and that when it would rain, they couldn't play. They just had to like sit along the outer edges and just be in gym for the 45, sorry, I'm shaking my camera, be in gym for the 35-40 minutes of the class in like rain. But a hole, I mean, a hole that substantially big where it blocks out the center of the gym, that didn't just come overnight in a hailstorm. That has been damaged for a long time, probably stayed damaged for a long time. Why isn't anybody doing anything about it? The education system in DC, and I know DC is a really big one. If you want to check out that documentary, Waiting for Superman, really fucking sad. And that one's not about black people, it's just about the education system failing our children. But if you look at the DC populace, there's a lot of black people and a lot of minorities. Again, people are like, oh, black people, racist people are basically like, black people are wired a certain way to be a certain way. And if you look at the circumstances, it is not their fault. It's not entirely their fault. Yeah, everybody has a choice, I understand that. But if you pay attention, there is nobody helping them or us to a large extent because we are not the majority. There's a reason the word minority is the umbrella term for a lot of people who are colored skin. And it has to do with us being the minority. Pay attention to the media you watch. Pay attention to the news you consume. Pay attention to the music you listen to. Pay attention to the directors of your favorite movies. Whether they're like a lot of black actors or not. Or minority actors and actresses. Pay attention to the producers, a lot of the media is controlled by white people. That's not to say it's bad. It's just in case you wanted to go on an anti-white person tirade. I mean, you're out of luck because a lot of stuff is run by the majority, and it's just something I want us to be aware of. I think it's something to ask about. Am I really watching a movie that's made for me, made by me? Or a song or a video game, is this really authentic? And if you can't relate, whether it's because you don't have the same cultural experience because of your skin color or just because of your location, and you should ask yourself, is this true? Like in the case of Mafia, I think those reviewers should have asked. They should have asked, is this a current experience that still goes on? Is this historically accurate? They're only saying that because they see stuff like what's it called? That movie where he's the butler in the White House. Oh my god, can't even remember. But it's got a. Oh my god, can't remember the actor. Basically, that black guy is a butler to the presidents throughout his generation. And basically, they see racial movies like that and think, oh man, we were racist back in the day. And that's another thing. White people are not a group, just the same way as black people are not a group. It's not fair to judge all white people against the racist barometer of their ancestors, because some of these people are still immigrants. Like some people, a lot of white people who look white are like Italian or Polish or some Germanic culture that like weren't even around or just weren't a part of the South. I mean, like, there's a lot. Again, the questions I want us to ask or be aware of is just about racism. Is it alive? Where is it in my media? Where is it around me personally? And just kind of, it's not about whose fault it is. It's just, why has it been perpetuated this long? What can we do to change it? How can we change the way we look at the world? How can we change the way we produce media? Yeah, I think, I mean, because it informs the public. People, the same way we watch like Straight Outta Compton to see how rappers came to fame, there's also a lot of people who watch that movie who are asking, like, what makes these people think they can say the things they do? That are judging them negatively, basically. And that's really it. I mean, I know this just seemed like one big old rambling rant, but it's because that's what it is. Again, I'm still trying to find a structure for the show. But yeah, I mean, I really don't have a stance on it. It's just, these are things I notice, and I want us to notice them as a people, as a society, as a culture, as a species. Just, I want us to be more aware of each other and of ourselves and how we interact with the world. And I think this topic was too big for the first episode. But again, it's a recurring theme. You'll see me come up with it. And I hope you learned something. Maybe if you forgot some history. I hope you're thinking now about any friends you have, whether they're minorities or not, how they interact with you, how they interact with their own family, what kind of movies they watch, what kind of movies you watch, music, video games, art, museums, cultural festivals that are in town. Just, I don't know, food for thought, I guess. And that's basically what this is always food for thought. Just chew on it until you're ready to swallow it, I guess. Or just spit it out if you don't like it. Anyway, thanks for watching. This has been a sufficiently tough/awkward episode for me. Just because there's a lot more. I could, again, make this an hour and a half or 2 hours, but I'm going to cut it short. I think I've said enough. And I don't know what the opposite of this opinion is. But I'm not going to go Klans member on you next episode and tell you how black people and minorities are the worst. Yeah. I will see you guys next week. Please remember to like, subscribe, comment, and share the video. And I will see y'all this coming up Friday in case y'all want to see that video game show, Leveled Up Weekly. If not, then I'll see you on the next Subject Matters. Thanks for watching. Bye.